what we are seeing from them is very much of a turnaround. How have they been able to do it?
I mean, look, they're doing it by committee, right? I mean, and the excuses are different, I suppose, because they don't have a number 9. That game, Arsenal against Liverpool. I mean, Darwin Núñez is one, but it's having all kinds of problems, just like Arsenal and Chelsea strikers, because they just don't have them. But I guess when you talk about Arsenal and Liverpool, we've talked about Arsenal and lack of depth. I mean, they do have 4 or 5 attacking players that from time to time can play, right? Luis Diaz and Jota. We see what sort of difference he makes when he's available and not injured. And Mo Salah, obviously, when he's there, but he's gone. And even Gakpo, who's not a goal scorer. But it just feels to me that Liverpool at least have 4 or 5 players where they can. Jurgen Klopp quickly switches from game to game and even within the game, and they somehow come with the goods. They've also done it with resurgence and reemergence of Van Dijk, who's been back to his best. I think that's very, very important. They've done it with Alisson, who's arguably the best goalkeeper there, Ederson or him. But, I mean, he comes up big on so many different occasions. Again, that's a massive difference from Arsenal, who don't even know who their number 1 is. You can even talk about Chelsea in the same way. So, I mean, those are just some of the key issues right now. And I think the biggest one is that I don't think that they expect it to be challenging for the title at this stage. So this all feels like a bonus, right? And if you play in the dressing room and your idea going into the season was, okay, priority number 1 is to get back into the Champions League. A club like Liverpool with so many titles in that competition has to be there. And then as you go in, because you in the midst of a rebuild, a little bit in the back, certainly in the midfield, even forward, right? I mean, you're still thinking to yourself, we're building the next great Liverpool Football Club. And in the middle of it, you find yourself top of the league. So for a player, I mean, that's an unbelievable psychological boost. That's why they're there, I think.
So just to put a bit of a bow on this with Liverpool here, Ryan, we're looking at maybe squad depth and a sense of identity proving to be key for them this season.
Yeah, I think one of the nice things about having a coach like Klopp is you can just build a team with a lot of good, maybe unique players, and he's going to figure out a way to get them all on the field and make it work. I think there was a lot of worry about them not having a defensive midfielder, and then they almost had one, and then they didn't, and then they got Endo, who's much outside the age profile of a player that Liverpool typically signs, and they've made it work. So I think that there's that. And then if you want to get into the emotional side of it, they still have like 4 or 5 key players that have won every trophy possible on the team, in addition to their coach. So if you think that there's some value in having done it before, they have done it before, even if most of the time that they didn't do it. So I think that there's probably some value there as well.
All right, let's get to your latest article then, Ryan. We did mention it. We've actually kind of half touched on some of the topics already in PL Express. So you've done the most urgent needs for 5 clubs here in the transfer window. So I'll remind you of them and then you can elaborate on each one of them. So we're going to start with Spurs. You say a centre-back is the most urgent need here. Elaborate.
Yeah, so with this, I wanted to, urgency was partially based on kind of what could happen for this team the rest of the season, right? Well, Manchester United and Chelsea, they don't really have that much to play for. So like, how urgent are any of the transfer needs in January for them? But Spurs, to me, they haven't got it finishing 4th. They could also finish like 7th or 8th. So they are kind of in an urgent position. And I think center back is just such an obvious position for a team like Spurs, where they press super high. They require their center backs to cover a ton of ground. So in a way, like, that style is going to make it so your center backs are more likely to get injured to begin with. And then they also really only have 2 center backs on the roster that can play this style. One of those center backs is Christian Romero, who is a walking red or yellow card suspension also. So I think just getting a kind of more athletic third center back would lower their floor significantly.
And number 2, Liverpool. Now, obviously, this has changed a little bit because of the news of Trent Alexander-Arnold's injury, keeping him out for a few weeks now. But your point was Trent support.
Yeah. So to me, he's the most irreplaceable player on Liverpool, just because he's basically, in the article, I jinxed him by comparing him to Andrea Pirlo in terms of the last player that was like dictating the attack of the game, not from like a, Busquets, like Busquets, like metronomic style of play, but Pirlo was assisting chances left and right from a very deep role. And Trent does the same thing for Liverpool, while also kind of being a fullback and also getting forwards. And there just aren't other players like that in the world, or you'd have to take some midfielder and teach him how to sort of play fullback at the same time. So to me, him getting injured was Liverpool's biggest weak point. And then, of course, while I was sleeping and the article was published, they announced that he was injured. So I think, to me, it's rather than trying to replace him or get like a worse version of him, I think you probably want like a more sort of defensive fullback. I mentioned like a Azpilicueta type, the sort of hybrid center back, fullback, to either support him so he can actually play in the midfield from the start, or to balance out when Andy Robertson comes back and is kind of bombing up and down the left side. So I might move this up to number 1 if I could retroactively change the piece after that.
Yeah, because your number 3 was something we've obviously touched on. It was a forward who can basically prevent Bukayo Saka running out of steam completely. When you actually look at the stats as well for Arsenal this season, we've partly touched on it in the show. Saka, with 20 goal contributions in 26 games this season, we're seeing a situation where it's like Saka or bust with Arsenal right now. So that's what they need for you here.
Yeah, I didn't have them higher on the list because of what I said earlier, and that their odds of winning the league have dropped significantly. So I feel like that should lower the urgency of making a move in a kind of paradoxical way. But yeah, I think getting someone who can back up Saka goes to Janish's earlier point. Like, Liverpool and City, I keep bringing them up because they're the teams that have challenged for the Premier League title over the past 5 years. They've always had more elite forwards than starting lineup places, right? There was always Jota or Firmino or Mahrez or Sterling sitting on the bench, right? And Arsenal just really don't have that. And I think with Saka, there's like a 2-part benefit. One, giving him some time off, so maybe he plays even better when he's on the field. And then 2, he's like the most important player at the club, and running him into the ground at the age of 22 has a lot of long-term risks for the team. So I think just getting someone who can play across the front line, but specifically play on the right wing, I think would be a good thing for Arsenal to try to do this January.
I'm going to skip past the next one because we're a little bit pushed for time, but please do go and read Ryan's article. It is West Ham, anyone who can score, which made me smile. But number 5 is City, Rodri back up. Good luck with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's more like get a defensive midfielder who Pep trusts, because they have another defensive midfielder on the roster, but he's not trusted by the manager. So, yeah, I mean, I think we've seen City replace KDB, Kevin De Bruyne, and Haaland this season, and they're still right in the title race. But they actually were quite bad in all the minutes that Rodri missed this season. So maybe the way to replace him is by getting a different player in a different position. And then you just simply accept you have to play differently when Rodri's injured. Play maybe more traditional style, get a traditional fullback who can get forward, which they really don't have on the roster. But I guess just some player who allows you to make up what Rodri's doing, even if it's not a player who's going to play Rodri's position exactly, I think is the one. City, we've seen Pep, they figure out every injury, they figure out how to fix it, but we still haven't actually seen them figure out how to play without Rodri.
Okay, well, please do go and see Ryan's article. I'm going to let you go now, Ryan. We're not going to ask Janish about Rodri because we will be here for another 2 hours because, as we know, this is a player that he absolutely loves. But thanks for being with us, Ryan. We'll see you again soon.